Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the source material you've shared with us, dig in, and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight.
Right. Our goal is really to give you a shortcut to being well-informed on a topic.
Exactly, complete with surprising facts and hopefully, a different lens to view things through.
And we act as your guides, helping you navigate the layers of information straight from the sources you've put before us.
Today, you've handed us a pretty significant stack. Excerpts from Noam Chomsky, 2011 How the World Works.pdf.
It's a compilation, isn't it? Drawn from speeches and interviews.
Yeah, and it aims to make some really complex ideas accessible to a wider audience.
Exactly. And the mission for this deep dive is to extract the key insights presented here. We want to understand a particular perspective, often a very critical one, on global power, economics, and society.
It definitely offers a view quite distinct from what you might find in, say, more conventional accounts.
It does. The material itself, well, it acknowledges its premise. Taking the analysis of a renowned intellectual distilled from talks and writings.
And presenting his view on how systems of power and control operate.
Precisely. So let's unpack this material together. We'll explore the historical context the source provides, the specific examples it uses to back its claims.
And the overarching critiques it presents regarding economic systems, corporate power, the media, all of that.
Yeah. What are the crucial insights that emerge from this specific look at how the world works?
Okay, let's dive in. Starting with the picture this source paints of the post-World War II era, the dramatic rise of U.S. power.
Right. The source identifies World War II as a fundamental turning point, a real watershed moment.
It highlights this incredible disparity, doesn't it, between the U.S. position and its industrial rivals.
Absolutely. I mean, the U.S. mainland was untouched by the conflict.
Production had more than tripled.
And it held, 50% of the world's wealth? Astonishing. Plus, control of both oceans.
Meanwhile, everyone else, Germany, Japan, Europe,
weakened or just destroyed. It gave the U.S. this unprecedented position of dominance and security.
And out of this position, the source describes the emergence of a strategy it calls the Grand Area Plan.
Yes, this is presented as the blueprint for a U.S.-led global order. The idea was to organize this vast area under U.S. control and influence.
Encompassing, well, pretty much the whole non-Soviet world.
Yeah.
Western Hemisphere, Western Europe, the Far East.
Key parts of the old British Empire, Middle East energy resources, and the rest of the global South, or the Third World as it was often called.
And within this plan, Germany and Japan weren't independent powers.
No, they were assigned roles as great workshops operating under U.S. direction. Others were there to serve specific functions, resource extraction, markets.
The source argues the thinking behind this is actually laid bare in specific documents, like Policy Planning Study 23 from 1948.
Exactly. Authored by George Kennan, a key figure in post-war planning.
This is where the source highlights what it sees as the raw, pragmatic core of the policy.
It quotes Kennan explicitly, saying they must dispense with all sentimentality and daydreaming.
Focus ruthlessly on immediate national objectives, dealing only in straight power concepts.
And critically, the quote continues, abandoning talk of human rights, the raising of living standards, and democratization.
Wow.
The clear objective, as framed by the source citing this document, was maintaining that extreme position of disparity, holding 50% of global wealth with only 6.3% of the population.
So the argument here is, the fundamental strategy wasn't about spreading democracy or prosperity, but really about consolidating and maintaining U.S. power and economic dominance, and explicitly putting aside that idealistic rhetoric.
That's precisely the source's central claim about this foundational period, and it then argues that implementing this Grand Area Plan required actively suppressing independence movements around the world.
Okay, so the core goal presented is preventing the rise of ultranationalist regimes. What does the source mean by that term?
Well, the source defines these as regimes that might prioritize their own domestic economic development.
So making stuff for their own people, not just for export. Using local investment.
Right. Or maybe restricting foreign capital's ability to just pull out profits and resources freely. Essentially, governments acting independently in their own perceived national interest.
Especially if that clashed with the interests of the dominant power.
Exactly. And because that kind of prioritizing is often popular within a country,
the source argues preventing it inherently relies on external force.
Precisely. It suggests this often meant relying on force, forming alliances with groups described, citing Kennedy planners on Latin America as simply the least anti-American.
Implying a preference for allies who would just go along rather than democratic forces.
That's the implication drawn. The source highlights the suppression of anti-fascist resistance movements globally right after WWII as a key early example.
Instead of supporting these groups that had fought fascism,
The U.S. and allies often installed or backed fascists and Nazi collaborators, according to the source.
it gives the example of Jean Darlan in French North Africa.
Yeah, a Vichy collaborator authored anti-Semitic laws, but backed by the U.S. because he was seen as stable and compliant.
And the material provides quite a few specific historical examples where it argues the U.S. intervened to prevent outcomes seen as unfavorable to this grand area idea.
Like post-WWII Italy, according to NSC-1 and 1948 document, the U.S. actually planned armed intervention if the communists won the election.
But they used subversion and withholding food instead.
That's what the source says, yeah. Noting Kennan had initially wanted military action before the election even happened.
Then there's Greece in 47.
Right, U.S. steps in after Britain withdraws, backing what the source calls a murderous war, leading to maybe 160,000 deaths.
Guatemala 1944 to 54 is detailed pretty extensively.
Yeah, the overthrow of a democratic government modeled on the New Deal, believe it or not. The source describes Washington's reaction as hysteria over this a capitalist democracy trying independent development.
It cites a 52 CIA memo warning about social reforms and nationalistic policies.
And the strength of the national movement. Even Jose Figueres, Costa Rica's democratic founder, apparently caused concern despite cooperating with the CIA just for having an independent streak. The source calls the coup's outcome turning Guatemala into a slaughterhouse.
Moving forward in time, Chile under Allende.
Described by Kissinger, according to the source, as a virus that could infect the region.
So the concern wasn't just resources, but the example it set.
That's the interpretation, the danger of its independent model spreading.
Nicaragua and the Sandinistas are presented similarly as a threat of democracy.
Because their reforms were working. The source quotes World Bank and Inter-American Development Bank reports calling projects extraordinarily successful.
And the U.S. response, according to the source.
The Contra War, described as an illegal terrorist force targeting soft targets, clinics, farms, plus an illegal economic boycott.
Aimed at undermining those social programs.
Explicitly so, citing journalist Julia Preston. It even mentions Figueres' later comment that the Sandinistas cared for their people being censored in the U.S.
El Salvador in the 70s and 80s. The source argues the U.S.-backed dictatorships ignored repression.
Right. And the growth of grassroots groups, peasant associations, unions, Bible study groups, these popular organizations, were seen as the real threat of democracy. Independent power centers.
Independent media shut down, editors killed or exiled.
And it details the murder of the 6 Jesuit priests, their cook, and her daughter in '89, linking it directly to the U.S.-trained Atla-Cattle Battalion.
Trained at the School of Special Forces.
Yeah, specialists in counterinsurgency. It even includes that quote from a U.S. trainer about taking ears instead of prisoners.
Grim. And it notes an AP correspondent reported that murders of other activists went largely unnoticed in the U.S.
Panama and Noriega, the source frames that not as a drug bust, but about Noriega becoming unreliable.
Dragging his feet on the Contras, threatening U.S. interests around the canal handover.
That's the argument. The goal was regaining control before the handover dates. It points to U.S. sanctions destroying the economy first.
And notes the invasion was unusual because there was no fear of Soviet reaction by then.
Right. Lastly, Haiti under Aristide. The source argues the U.S. response to the coup against him focused on his alleged atrocities,
while downplaying the much bigger slaughter after the coup.
And it highlights the refugee policy contrast. Cubans often treated as political, Haitians fleeing violence as economic, sent back to likely danger.
The goal being to install moderates, meaning business interests.
That's the interpretation, portraying Aristide as backward, calling Clinton's policy cynical.
So these examples, taken together, are used by the source to build this picture of a consistent pattern. U.S. foreign policy actively intervening, often violently,
to prevent or reverse independent development and democratic outcomes perceived as threats to the Grand Area Framework.
Okay, moving from foreign policy, the source then turns its critical lens onto the global economic system itself, and terms like free markets, free enterprise.
Yeah, it fundamentally challenges the conventional narrative here.
Arguing that free enterprise, as described in textbooks or editorials, doesn't really reflect how the U.S. economy actually works.
Exactly. The core argument is massive reliance on state intervention, public subsidies.
Especially